Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to deep dive into some seriously thought-provoking stuff, the kind that makes you question everything you thought you knew about human behavior.
We're talking about those moments when logic goes right out the window and our emotions completely take over. Think like road rage or those impulse purchases you regret later, or even, a little harmless payback.
Oh, the sweet taste of revenge. That's actually a perfect segue because our guide for this deep dive is Dan Ariely's The Upside of Irrationality.
Yeah, and we're focusing specifically on chapters 6 through 9, where he shares some really eye-opening insights from his research, and even gets a little personal with some of his own experiences, which honestly are some of the best parts.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, who doesn't love a good revenge story? And Ariely sets the stage with this epic battle that he had with Audi customer service.
Yeah, so like new car breaks down on a work trip and then it's just weeks of getting the runaround. It's so relatable, right? Like we've all been there. Oh, totally. It's like that feeling of being completely powerless. But what's interesting is that it wasn't just the car malfunctioning for him, right? It was the way the company handled it.
Yeah, the lack of empathy, the dismissive attitude, that's what fueled Ariely's desire for revenge.
And he didn't just complain. He took it to a whole other level, which we'll get to a little bit later. But first, we got to talk about why this whole revenge thing is such a powerful motivator.
Totally. Like, what is it about getting even that feels so good?
Yeah, and Ariely actually did some fascinating experiments to figure out just how common this urge for payback really is.
One experiment, researchers decided to just annoy participants with a fake phone call while they were in the middle of a task.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
Right. And guess what? They were so much more likely to, like, steal extra money when they were given the chance.
So basically, if you're rude to me, I'm more likely to fudge my expenses. I'm kind of liking this whole revenge thing.
Well, hold on now. I think it's important to distinguish between, like, what we might call strong revenge and simply complaining.
Right. Okay, yeah, good point.
Strong revenge is more than venting. It's about actively seeking to inflict some kind of harm, even if it's minor.
Right, right. Okay, so maybe I won't go full-blown vigilante on the next barista who gets my order wrong. But, Airly does bring up this interesting concept of agents versus principals.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
Like, should we take revenge on a company, the principal, for the bad behavior of an employee, the agent?
It's a great question because, honestly, we often don't seem to care, right? We direct our anger at the company as a whole, even if it's just one person who messed up.
Yeah, exactly. It's like yelling at the poor customer service rep who probably hates their job just as much as you hate being on hold.
But Ariely's research suggests that companies really need to pay attention to this because that agent's bad behavior,
Yeah.
yeah, it can totally trigger a desire for revenge that ultimately impacts the company.
And speaking of revenge, Airly didn't just sit around fuming about his Audi experience, right? He turned it into a fictionalized case study for the Harvard Business Review,
Oh, wow.
like exposing their bad practices to the world. I mean, talk about commitment.
That's amazing. He found a way to channel his frustration into something productive while still, inflicting a kind of reputational damage, which for a company can be a powerful form of revenge.
Oh, absolutely. But does this mean that any complaint is fair game as long as we frame it as revenge? Like, should we all be writing scathing blog posts about every minor inconvenience?
I don't know about that. Remember that annoying phone call experiment?
Yeah.
Well, they found that even a simple apology completely erased those negative feelings.
Yeah.
Participants were much more likely to return the quote-unquote stolen money after a sincere sorry.
Interesting. So maybe the key isn't necessarily avoiding all negative experiences, but figuring out how to handle them effectively. Like a little empathy goes a long way.
It seems so, yeah. Acknowledging the harm, showing a bit of vulnerability, that can often break the revenge cycle. But this brings up another really fascinating question. If we're all so prone to seeking revenge, how do we even function as a society?
Right. Because if every minor annoyance triggered a vengeful rampage, the world would be pretty chaotic.
Exactly. So how do we manage to keep it all together?
Well, that's where adaptation comes in.
Adaptation.
But I adapt to things all the time. Like I get used to the traffic noise outside my window, or wearing old shoes, or even bad news eventually.
Exactly. And that's what's so intriguing about it. We adapt to both positive and negative experiences.
Okay, so there are different types of adaptation.
There are two main types.
Hmm.
Sensory, like getting used to smells or sounds, and hedonic, which is more emotional.
So sensory adaptation is why I barely notice the smell of my dog anymore. And hedonic adaptation is why the excitement of buying a new car fades after a few weeks.
You got it. And Ariely illustrates this beautifully with his own experience recovering from severe burns. He thought he would be miserable forever, but to his surprise, he adapted way more than he expected.
Wow, that's amazing. It really shows just how resilient the human spirit can be. But this whole adaptation thing also raises some interesting questions about decision making, right?
Absolutely. We often overestimate how long feelings of happiness or sadness will last. And this affects everything from, buying a new phone to ending a relationship. We think the excitement or pain will last forever, but it usually levels out.
Hmm. So that new phone I've been eyeing, the thrill's gonna fade fast, huh?
Think of it as a hedonic treadmill. We're constantly chasing the next new thing for that happiness boost, but it fades, and then we need something else. We adapt, and the cycle continues.
Ugh, I'm so guilty of that. Okay, this is all pretty mind-blowing, but I'm curious, like, if we adapt to pretty much everything, good or bad, why are humans so terrible at helping others in need? It seems like our empathy has an off switch sometimes.
You've hit on a major paradox, haven't you?
Yeah.
It's called the identifiable victim effect. We're wired to react strongly to one person's suffering, but these large-scale tragedies often leave us, well, cold.
Yeah, like I'll donate to a GoFundMe for a specific family who, lost their home in a fire. But a news report about thousands of people displaced by a natural disaster barely registers.
Exactly. And Ari liked about this with the baby Jessica case. Remember the little girl who fell down a well? Huge news. People were glued to the coverage, donations poured in, but meanwhile, horrific things were happening in Rwanda with barely a mention.
It's almost like our brains can't process that much suffering at once, so we just shut down.
Right.
But why are we so much more responsive to a single person's story than to statistics about mass suffering?
Well, it seems our empathy is triggered by closeness.
Hmm.
So how connected we feel to the victim, and by vividness, how easily we can picture their suffering. So when it's a single person, we feel that closeness, we can put a face to the story, but with millions it becomes abstract, less real.
Right. And then there's that drop in the bucket feeling, if I feel like my efforts won't make a real difference, I'm less likely to even try. It's like, what's the point of donating a few dollars when millions are needed?
Yeah, and here's the kicker. Ariely's research shows that even making people more rational doesn't increase their giving. It actually completely backfired.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they shut down all their emotional responses entirely.
So no compassion at all.
No compassion at all.
Wow. So being like Mr. Spock doesn't make us better at charity.
Not necessarily. There's a danger in both extremes, right?
Yeah.
If we're purely emotional, we might waste resources on individual cases while ignoring these bigger issues.
Yeah.
But being completely cold and calculating shuts off our empathy completely.
He even shared this graph showing that the more people affected by a tragedy, the less money actually gets donated. It's almost like our compassion has this like limited bandwidth or something.
It's a stark reminder that our intuitive responses aren't always the best guide. We need a balance between our, gut feelings and a reasoned understanding of the problem's scale.
Okay, so we're wired for revenge. We adapt to almost everything, and our empathy is easily manipulated. What a mess.
It's a fascinating mess, though, right? And it gets even more interesting when we apply these concepts to something like, I don't know, the dating world.
Ooh, yes.
How does this all play out when we're looking for a partner?
Yeah, because finding the one isn't exactly known for being a purely rational endeavor. So how do revenge, adaptation, and empathy actually factor into our romantic choices?
Well, Ariely, he kind of dives into this whole like hot or not phenomenon, right? Exploring how our perceptions of attractiveness play out when we're looking for a partner.
Yeah, and he did it in this really clever way by teaming up with the creators of that website, Hot or Not. Do you remember that one?
Oh, yeah.
It was all the rage back in the day.
The OG of rating people.
Totally. And by using this platform, Ariely was able to study how people rate each other's attractiveness and more importantly, who they actually contact for dates.
Right. So he wasn't just looking at who we find attractive in theory, but who we actually go for in real life.
Exactly. And the results were pretty fascinating. You might think that people with less conventional looks would kind of adapt by lowering their standards, but But that wasn't the case. People generally agreed on who was attractive, regardless of their own, appearance.
So no matter how you look, you still have the same idea of what's considered attractive.
Yeah, precisely. It seems like there's this shared standard of beauty, even if it's, influenced by cultural norms and all sorts of other factors.
Right.
But if our standards don't change, how do we adapt to the reality that not everyone can date a supermodel?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. So while people's perception of attractiveness remained pretty consistent when it came to actually like reaching out to someone for a date, they tended to aim within their own perceived attractiveness range.
Oh, so we're all aware of our market value, so to speak, and we make decisions accordingly. It's like this self-imposed filter.
Exactly, yeah. It's a fascinating insight into how self-awareness and social dynamics actually shape our behavior, even in something as seemingly superficial as dating.
Mm.
We adapt not by changing our standards, but by being realistic about our options.
Okay, so we're not changing what we find attractive, but,
Right.
but maybe we're shifting our priorities. Like, if someone knows they're not a 10, they might focus on finding a partner who's, funny or kind instead.
Right, and that's what they found. They did a speed dating experiment.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, people who rated themselves as less conventionally attractive were more likely to prioritize personality and shared interests.
Makes sense, right? We all want to connect with someone who gets us, who shares our values, and that goes beyond looks.
Totally, it's about finding those deeper connections. And interestingly, Ariely found some gender differences in all of this. Um, Unsurprisingly, men were much more likely to send out those meet me requests on Hot or Not. And they also tended to aim for women who were rated as more attractive than themselves.
So guys are shooting their shot, even if it's a long shot. But what about the women? Were they just as bold?
Well, not quite. Women were much more selective. They seemed
Okay.
to be less focused on looks alone.
Okay.
They seemed to factor in the likelihood of their request being accepted, so more strategic overall.
It's like they're playing chess, not checkers. But this all makes you wonder, like, how much does our perception of attractiveness really matter
Yeah.
in the long run? Do we adapt to our, market value and just settle?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right? And Ariely reflects on this personally, being someone who had to adjust to dramatic changes in his physical appearance.
Yeah.
After his accident.
Right.
And he talks about, feeling like his market value plummeted, but at the same time he knew his core self hadn't really changed.
Right. It's a tough thing to grapple with. On one hand, you're aware of these societal perceptions, but on the other, you're still you.
Right.
Your worth as a person shouldn't be tied to your appearance.
Absolutely. And he wrestled with this, wondering how he would react if someone with a similar injury asked him out.
Hmm.
It made him question like what he could realistically expect from potential partners.
Yeah, I can see how that would be really disheartening. Like, are people really that shallow?
But thankfully it seems there's more to the story.
Yeah.
He eventually found love and happiness with a woman who saw beyond his physical appearance. And through his research, he found evidence that this isn't just a one-off experience. People really do adapt, not by lowering their standards, but by prioritizing other qualities like kindness, intelligence, humor. Those things become more important over time.
That's reassuring. It's like the classic saying, beauty fades, but
But a great sense of humor is forever.
okay, maybe not forever, but
Yeah.
but you get the point. It's about finding someone who makes you laugh, who challenges you intellectually, who shares your values. Those are the qualities that really matter for long-term happiness.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings us back to that fascinating interplay of adaptation and empathy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. We adapt to changes in ourselves and in our circumstances. But we also had this capacity to connect with others on a deeper level, to see beyond the superficial.
So what does this all mean for us? How do we use this knowledge to make better decisions in our own lives, especially when it comes to those big questions like who we choose to spend our lives with? Yeah, it's like, how do we balance those initial gut reactions, like that spark of attraction, with a deeper understanding of what truly makes for a fulfilling relationship.
Right. That's the challenge, isn't it? And I think Ariely's research really does offer some valuable insights here. We've seen how easily our desire for revenge can be triggered, how readily we adapt to both the good and the bad experiences, and how our empathy can be manipulated by
Yeah.
factors like closeness and vividness.
So if our emotional responses are so easily swayed, how do we actually use this knowledge to make better decisions? Not just in our personal lives, but also, in a broader sense,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to helping others effectively.
It's a question worth pondering for sure. There's no easy answer. But I think the first step is simply being aware of these underlying forces at play,
Yeah.
understanding the complexities of human behavior, the interplay of our emotions and our rational minds. That can empower us to make more informed choices in all areas of our lives.
Right. It's like knowing that we're prone to that identifiable victim effect. Maybe we can make a conscious effort to extend our empathy beyond those single heart-wrenching stories to consider the larger scale of suffering, even when it's harder to process.
Exactly, yeah. And recognizing that we adapt to both the good and the bad, maybe we can focus on cultivating those experiences that bring lasting joy rather than, chasing fleeting pleasures.
It's about being mindful of that hedonic treadmill, right?
Yeah.
Not letting ourselves get caught in that endless cycle of wanting more, more, more.
Precisely. And when it comes to those inevitable moments of frustration when that urge for revenge kicks in, maybe we could take a step back, consider the power of a sincere apology and try to break the cycle before it escalates.
So it's not about suppressing our emotions, but rather becoming more aware of them and understanding how they influence our actions.
Yeah, well said. It's about finding that balance between our gut reactions and our rational minds. It's about recognizing our own biases and limitations while also appreciating this incredible capacity for empathy, for adaptation, and even a bit of calculated revenge that makes us human.
It's a lot to think about, but that's what makes these deep dives so fascinating, right? They give us a glimpse into the intricate workings of our own minds and leave us with more questions than answers, prompting us to continue exploring and evolving.
Absolutely. And ultimately that journey of self-discovery, of understanding ourselves and our place in the world, that's what makes life so rich and rewarding.
Well said. On that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.